An elderly millionaire is humiliated and thrown out of a luxury car dealership because of his simple clothes. Minutes later, he returns, and his actions leave all the staff in shock. Walter Thompson was a man whose modest appearance hid a secret that few knew. At 72, he was a self-made millionaire, someone who had built his fortune through hard work and determination, but who, by choice, maintained a modest lifestyle. His gray hair and expressive blue eyes reflected wisdom and humility, qualities he valued more than any material possession. That day, Walter decided it was time to fulfill a long-held dream, to buy a luxury car. Not to impress anyone, but as a symbol of his journey and achievements. He drove his old, worn-out car to Starlight Motors, the most exclusive dealership in town, known for catering only to the elite. Wearing a simple shirt, cotton pants, and well-worn shoes, he looked nothing like the typical customer at that store. As he entered the dealership, Walter immediately felt the judgmental glances from the sales staff. The luxurious space, filled with glass and marble, seemed to swallow anyone who didn't match the profile of the usual patrons. Employees whispered among themselves, exchanging looks full of disdain as they assessed Walter from head to toe. Before he could take a closer look at the vehicles, Walter was approached by Robert Miller, a young and arrogant salesman who came up with a fake smile. Robert wore an impeccable suit, and his gaze showed a mix of superiority and contempt. "Good afternoon, sir," Robert said with a dry tone and a raised eyebrow. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't exactly a showroom for everyone, if you know what I mean." Walter, keeping calm, replied, "Yes, I'm in the right place. I'm interested in that sports model over there, Borber. Could you give me more information?" Robert let out a sarcastic laugh and looked over at his colleagues who were enjoying the scene in the background. "That car? I'm not sure if it's exactly within your budget, sir. Maybe we should look at something more, let's say, suitable for your style." Walter didn't back down. "I would like to know more about it, please," he insisted. At that moment, another salesman named Mark, who had been watching from a distance, came closer with a mocking smile. "Robert, I think he's talking about our economy line." "Oh wait, we don't even have an economy line here." The two laughed loudly, causing even more laughter among the other employees. "Look, my friend," Robert continued, now with an even crueler tone, "I don't want to be rude, but these cars are for people who can actually afford them. Maybe a used car would be more appropriate for you, or perhaps a visit to a public auction?" Walter felt the sting of humiliation but remained calm and composed. "I really would like to know about that specific car," he said, pointing again to the luxury vehicle. Robert sighed, as if wasting his precious time, and said in a sharp tone, "Let me be clear, that car costs more than you've probably made in your entire life. We don't want to waste our time, and I'm sure you don't either, so why not save everyone the trouble and just leave?" Walter's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested he already had everything under control. "Thank you for your time," he said calmly. He turned around and began to walk towards the exit. "Let's play a little joke on those who only read the comments. They won't understand. Comment hamburger in the comments. Only those who get this far will know what it means." Now let's continue with the story. As Walter walked away, Mark couldn't resist making one last jab. "Hey, if you need a ride to the used car dealership, just let me know," he shouted, drawing laughter from the entire team. Walter stopped for a moment, looked over his shoulder, and with a calm smile, replied, "Maybe I'll be back soon." And he left the store, leaving all the employees laughing at his expense. As Walter walked out of the Starlight Motors, the laughter of the employees still echoed in his ears. He kept his head held high, but inside, he was reflecting on the cruelty and judgment he had just faced. Walter always knew that people tended to judge others based on their appearance, but the public humiliation he had just endured touched him deeply. However, instead of feeling defeated, an idea began to take shape in his mind. As Walter made his way to his old car, he made a quick call to someone he trusted deeply. "Doyle," he said on the phone, "get the team ready and meet me at Starlight Motors in an hour. It's time to teach a lesson about respect." On the other end of the line, Doyle, his longtime lawyer and right-hand man, quickly agreed, already recognizing the determined tone in Walter's voice. Back at the dealership, Robert and Mark were still savoring their little victory. "Did you see that old man's face? Thinking he could actually buy one of our cars?" Mark said, shaking his head in disbelief. "How dare he walk in here dressed like that? I bet he thought we were having a clearance sale." Robert laughed loudly and replied, "I was this close to asking if he had a discount coupon. I bet he couldn't even afford a tire from that sports car." They laughed again, receiving approving nods from the other salespeople who were enjoying the situation. At that moment, a well-dressed customer entered the store, immediately attracting the attention of the salespeople, who quickly changed their expressions to welcoming smiles. Robert and Mark rushed to serve him, completely ignoring the incident with Walter as if it had never happened. It was clear that for them, respectful treatment was reserved only for those who seemed to deserve it. An hour passed, and the staff at Starlight Motors were back to their usual routine. The atmosphere of superiority continued to dominate the place, and no one imagined that their lives were about to change. When the sound of powerful engines was heard outside, everyone looked towards the entrance of the dealership. Walter Thompson was back, but this time he was not alone. Instead of his old, worn-out car, he arrived in a luxurious black sedan, accompanied by a fleet of high-end vehicles. As he got out of the car, Walter was now wearing a flawless suit, worthy of a magnate, and was followed by a team of lawyers and assistants, all dressed elegantly. Doyle, his lawyer, walked by his side with a determined expression on his face. Silence fell over the dealership. The smug smiles of the employees froze in the air, and all eyes turned to Walter in a mix of surprise and confusion. Robert, who had considered himself unbeatable in his world of disdain, swallowed hard as he saw Walter approaching with such authority. "Well?" Walter said with a calm smile, but this time with a glint of determination in his eyes. "It looks like I'm in the right place after all." Robert, now visibly unsettled, tried to regain his composure. "Mr. Thompson, right? I didn't expect to see you back so soon. We were just joking before. I hope you didn't take it seriously," he stammered, clearly trying to save face. Walter kept his gaze steady on Robert and said, with a calm but firm tone, "Joking, you say? It's funny how some people's jokes reveal more about who they really are." He paused strategically, letting his words echo through the showroom. The other salespeople who had laughed at Walter before now stood silent, their expressions shifting to a mix of shame and embarrassment. Mark tried to step back, hiding among the other employees, but Walter's eyes were fixed on them like a silent judgment. "I came here today to buy a car," Walter continued, turning his gaze to the sports car that Robert had mocked earlier. "And after everything that happened, I'm thinking of buying not just this car, but maybe all of them." The shock on Robert's face and the other employees was undeniable. They all stood in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had just heard. Walter turned to Doyle, his lawyer, and said in a serious tone, but with a hint of satisfaction, "Doyle, let's start the purchase process." "With pleasure, Mr. Thompson," Doyle responded, nodding to the assistants, who immediately began discussing the transaction details. Robert, now desperate, tried to approach Walter with a falsely friendly expression. "Mr. Thompson, we honestly didn't know who you were. If we had known, we would have treated you with all the respect you deserve." Walter slowly turned to face him. "And why should I deserve respect just because of who I am? Respect is a courtesy that should be given to everyone, regardless of their appearance or what they own." With that response, Walter made it clear that the rules of the game had changed, and everyone at Starlight Motors now understood that the man they had scorned was, in fact, someone who could change their lives forever. As Walter's assistants worked on the details of the purchase, the atmosphere inside Starlight Motors was filled with tension and surprise. All the employees stood motionless, watching the scene with astonished looks. It was impossible for them to comprehend that the man they had treated with such disdain was now about to make a monumental acquisition that could change the dealership's future. Walter observed the pale and uneasy faces of Robert and his colleagues. He could see the fear and regret forming in their expressions, and a part of his heart felt that this was an opportunity for a much greater lesson. But before acting, he needed a moment to reflect on how he had reached this point. to remember his own life journey. As the lawyers continued the process, Walter stepped outside for a moment to get some fresh air. He walked slowly to a nearby park, where he sat on a bench, watching the people around him. This was a place he used to visit during his toughest years, when he faced challenges that seemed impossible to overcome. In his mind, he went back to a time when life was very different. He remembered his youth, working long hours in factories and in the humble corners of the city. Every penny he earned was hard-fought, and the reality he faced was tough and relentless. There were days when he wondered if all his effort would ever lead to something greater. And yet, he never gave up. It was his resilience, his desire to build something solid and meaningful, that pushed him to keep going. Walter also remembered the countless doors that were slammed in his face, the people who underestimated him and said he would never get anywhere because of his humble origins. The discrimination he faced for not fitting the social standards set by the elite never stopped him from fighting for his goals. These memories reignited in Walter a sense of purpose. He knew he needed to use this opportunity to teach those who disrespected him a valuable lesson. Suddenly, a special memory crossed his mind. He thought of his late wife, Margaret, who always believed in his ability to overcome all adversities. Margaret was the person who never judged him for his clothes or the money in his pocket. She always looked beyond appearances, focusing on Walter's kindness and character. The thought of her brought a gentle smile to his lips. He knew that wherever she was now, she would be proud of the stand he was about to take. With renewed determination, Walter stood up from the bench and headed back to the dealership. He was ready to show those who had humiliated him that it wasn't wealth or status that defined a person's worth, but rather the integrity and respect with which we treat others. When he entered Starlight Motors again, all heads turned toward him. The air of surprise and astonishment still dominated the place. Robert and Mark's eyes were fixed on Walter, now without a hint of arrogance or disdain. There was only the fear of facing the consequences of their actions. Walter stopped in the middle of the showroom, looked around and said loudly, so everyone could hear, "I've spent much of my life being judged by my appearance. I've faced people who thought they knew everything about me just by looking at my clothes or the car I drove. But what I've learned is that a person's true value lies in their ability to treat others with dignity, regardless of what they see on the outside." The dealership staff were now completely silent, hanging on every word Walter said. Robert, with his eyes lowered, seemed like a completely defeated man. He knew that his words and actions had been a reflection of his own prejudice and inability to see beyond appearances. "Today," Walter continued, "you judged me like many have done in the past. But let me tell you something. I am not the only one who deserved respect. Every customer who walks through these doors, whether rich or poor, deserves to be treated with the same courtesy and consideration." Walter's words hit everyone in the room like a wave, forcing them to reflect on their own behavior and attitudes. He turned to Doyle and said, "It's time to finalize this transaction. I want the purchase process to continue and every detail to be documented. And I also want everyone here to understand that this is a lesson about the importance of human values." Doyle nodded with a subtle smile, and the lawyers continued with the procedures. Walter was now more certain than ever that he was doing the right thing, not just for himself, but for everyone witnessing what was happening. He knew that, one way or another, this lesson would be remembered by those employees for a long time. Inside Starlight Motors, the atmosphere had completely changed. What was once an air of superiority and arrogance had turned into a heavy silence, full of uncertainty and regret. All eyes were fixed on Walter Thompson, the man they had underestimated and treated with disdain, now standing before them with a presence no one could ignore. As Walter's lawyers continued discussing the details of the vehicle purchases, Robert and Mark desperately tried to pull themselves together. Robert, who had once been the picture of arrogance and confidence, was now visibly shaken. He glanced at Walter from the corner of his eye, struggling to find a way to repair the damage he had caused. "Mr. Thompson," Robert finally approached, forcing a nervous smile, "I'd like to apologize for any misunderstanding. Honestly, we had no idea who you were. If we had known, of course, we would have treated you very differently. Walter raised an eyebrow and kept a calm but piercing gaze. So what you're saying is that you would only have treated me with respect if you knew I was wealthy? He replied in a serene yet meaningful voice. Robert stammered, unable to find a response that didn't sound utterly hypocritical. That's not what I meant, Mr. Thompson. It's just that we have a customer service policy that, well, needs to be adjusted, he said, clearly trying to avoid admitting the truth. Before Robert could sink any further, Mark, also in a panic, tried to step in. Look, Mr. Thompson, we truly regret how we treated you. We just didn't expect someone as important as you to walk in without any warning. You know, we're used to dealing with a certain kind of customer. Walter gave a slight smile, shaking his head in disapproval. And what exactly is that type of customer, Mark? Someone who dresses according to your standards? Someone who looks like they have enough money to deserve your attention? Is that what defines a person's worth? Walter's words echoed through the showroom like an undeniable truth. Each of the staff members present was being forced to confront their own attitudes and prejudices. It was clear that everyone felt uncomfortable, as Walter's words exposed a reality they could no longer ignore. At that moment, Doyle, Walter's lawyer, approached with a contract in hand and said, "Mr. Thompson, the documents are ready. Just one signature from you, and we'll finalize the purchase of all the cars and the property of Starlight Motors." The eyes of all the employees widened in shock. The possibility of Walter acquiring the entire dealership was something none of them could have imagined. Robert, desperate to save his job and reputation, made one last attempt to appeal to Walter's goodwill. "Mr. Thompson, I know we treated you poorly, but please consider our actions as a momentary lapse," Robert said, almost pleading. "Give us a chance to make things right. I promise we'll never judge anyone by their appearance again." Walter looked deeply into Robert's eyes, and for a moment the entire showroom seemed to stand still. He took a deep breath, as if weighing each word he was about to say, before finally responding, "You know, Robert, giving a second chance is easy when it comes to business. But giving a second chance when what's at stake is a person's character, that's much harder. However, I believe that no one is perfect, and that everyone deserves a chance to redeem themselves." Robert and Mark seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, but Walter wasn't finished yet. "I'm not buying this dealership just to own it. I'm buying it to transform it. I want Starlight Motors to be a place where every customer, no matter their appearance or status, is treated with respect and dignity. And that change starts with each of you." He then turned to Doyle and said, "Arrange a meeting with the entire team. I want every employee to undergo intensive customer service training, focused on empathy, respect, and equality." The tension in the room began to lift, replaced by a feeling of hope and redemption. Walter continued, "And as for you, Robert and Mark, you will lead this training. I want you to be the first to learn and apply these new values. You will set the example of what it means to treat everyone with respect, no matter who walks through these doors." The silence that followed Walter's words was broken by a murmur of approval from the other employees. Some seemed grateful for the second chance they were being given, while others were clearly moved by the lesson they had just learned. Mark, with a humbled expression on his face, finally spoke up. I really appreciate this opportunity, Mr. Thompson. I know we don't deserve it, but I promise we'll do our best to change." Walter nodded, satisfied with the response. "I hope you do it not because you expect to gain something in return, but because it's the right thing to do. Because everyone deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or social standing." With those words, Walter turned to look at the showroom one last time. The space, which once represented arrogance and exclusivity, now seemed different, as if on the verge of a profound change. And that change was only beginning. The atmosphere inside Starlight Motors was charged with a mix of surprise, relief, and introspection after Walter's words. The employees seemed to be starting to understand the depth of the lesson he was teaching them. Walter knew there was still more to reveal, something that would leave a lasting impression on everyone there. As everyone watched Walter's actions intently, he took a step forward and lifted a folder that Doyle handed him. With a determined look, he said loudly, so everyone could hear, "You don't know the whole story yet, but it's time for you to understand who you're dealing with. Before you judge someone by what they wear, it's important to know their journey." He opened the folder and began to share his own story. "I was born in a small town to a very humble family. From a young age, I worked hard to help my parents, doing small jobs and saving every penny I could. In my youth, no one believed I would achieve great things because all they saw was a poor boy with no resources." Let's play a little joke on those who only read the comments. They won't get it. Comment popcorn in the comments. Only those who get this far will know what it means. Now let's continue with the story. Walter paused, observing the curious and somewhat embarrassed faces of the employees. He knew his words were starting to sink deep into their minds. "I decided that my financial situation would not define my worth. I fought for every opportunity, faced prejudice, was dismissed countless times, but I never gave up. With every closed door, I worked twice as hard to build my own path." The dealership employees were fully attentive, captivated by Walter's inspiring and emotional story. Robert, who once embodied arrogance and disdain, now seemed lost in his own thoughts, perhaps remembering all the times he had judged someone based on their appearance. "After many years of struggle," Walter continued, "I managed to build my own company, which grew to become one of the largest investment conglomerates in the country. I didn't build my fortune on luxury or show, but on the value of honest work and respect for people, regardless of their circumstances." At that moment, he looked directly at Robert and Mark, his eyes reflecting a blend of compassion and firmness. "I was once like you," he said gently, "and I know very well what it feels like to be judged by your appearance. But the true difference between who we are and who we can become lies in our ability to learn and change." Walter turned to Doyle and continued, "To make sure everyone here understands what I mean, I'm going to do more than just buy this dealership. I'm going to transform it into something that benefits the community. This store won't just be a showroom for luxury cars, but a center of opportunity." Silence filled the room. Everyone was hanging on his every word, completely absorbed by the impact of what Walter was revealing. "I'm going to create a training and development program for young people from humble backgrounds, those who, like I was in the past, didn't have many chances to stand out," Walter announced. "These young people will have the opportunity to learn about the automotive market, customer service, and above all, how to treat every person who walks in here with the dignity they deserve." Robert and Mark were speechless. Their faces showed a mix of shame and regret. They now understood that the man they had ridiculed was much more than an ordinary customer. He was someone who had faced real struggles and had emerged stronger and more generous. "But there's one condition," Walter said with a slight smile. "Robert, Mark, you will be the mentors of this program. I want you to teach these young people not only technical skills, but also the most valuable lesson you learned today. The true worth of a person isn't in their appearance or what they own, but in their character and the respect they show to others." Robert was about to speak, but he seemed at a loss for words. Finally, he took a deep breath and, in a quiet tone, said, "Mr. Thompson, I really don't know what to say. I can't express how ashamed I am of the way we acted, but I promise I'll do my best to change and be a better example from now on." Mark, still visibly moved, added, "Me too, Mr. Thompson. I never imagined I'd go through something like this. I know we failed to treat you with respect, and I sincerely apologize. We'll accept this opportunity as a chance to do things the right way." Walter nodded slowly, as if giving his approval. He knew that those words were just the beginning of a transformation process for Robert, Mark, and everyone else present. "Remember," he said, "what truly matters is not the mistake you made, but what you do from this point on to correct it and grow as human beings." With those words, Walter closed the folder he was holding and looked around the showroom, feeling that his mission there was just beginning. He knew that, in some way, this moment would change not only the dealership, but also the lives of everyone who worked there. And that, for him, was the true reward. As Walter signed the documents, officially sealing the purchase of Starlight Motors, he looked around the dealership with a contemplative expression. the employees were still trying to process what had just happened. It was hard for them to believe that the man they had treated with so much disdain had not only acquired all the luxury cars, but had also become the new owner of the dealership. Walter maintained a deliberate silence for a few moments, letting the magnitude of his actions resonate throughout the room. He then stepped forward and said something no one expected. In addition to transforming this dealership into a symbol of equality and respect, I want to share something that will change the future for all of you. At that moment, all eyes turned to him, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Walter continued, his voice carrying both empathy and compassion, but also an undeniable strength. I've learned from my lawyer Doyle that many of you have worked here for years without ever being given a real opportunity to grow. You were passed over for promotions and treated as disposable, unless you appeared wealthy or of high status. Walter's words struck like a lightning bolt in the silence of the dealership, hitting each employee with an undeniable truth. Mark and Robert, standing in the back, exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. Walter wasn't just addressing their mistakes. He was exposing the deeper structural injustices within the company itself. "I was once like you," Walter said, looking directly into the eyes of the younger salespeople, those who had been overlooked while the arrogant veterans dominated the scene. "I know what it's like to work hard, give your best, and still be ignored, underestimated, and judged just because you don't fit someone's idea of how you should look. But I never let that define who I was." He took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment to reveal the full impact of his decision. "From today, as the new owner of Starlight Motors, I'm not here just to change the store's appearance or procedures. I'm here to transform the lives of those who've never had a chance to shine. All of you will have the opportunity to grow, to learn, and to advance, as long as you are willing to dedicate yourselves and treat others with genuine respect." The shock on the employees' faces was replaced by a mix of hope and emotion. For many, this was something they never expected to hear in a place so focused on appearance and profit. For the first time, they felt seen and heard. But Walter didn't stop there. He motioned to Doyle, who immediately handed an envelope to each employee present. "Inside these envelopes," Walter explained, "you'll find an offer for a profit-sharing plan with the dealership. I believe that when we work together, everyone should share in the success. I want each of you to feel that you are an important part of the growth and the change that will happen here." Robert opened his envelope with trembling hands, hardly believing what he was reading. He looked over at Mark, who was also stunned. Neither of them expected that the man they had humiliated and ridiculed just minutes earlier would offer them a chance to become not just employees, but true partners in the company's success. "You were quick to judge me based on what I wore, but the real measure of a person isn't in the clothes they wear or the car they drive." Walter continued, his voice strong but filled with kindness. "It's in how they choose to use the power they have, and I choose to use it to give opportunities to those who never had them." At that moment, something truly remarkable happened. One of the youngest employees, named Emily, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm one of those people who has been overlooked here for so long. I never had the chance to show my worth because I was always judged by my appearance and lack of experience. But today, for the first time, I feel like someone really cares." Let's play a little joke on those who only read the comments. They won't understand. Comment Coca-Cola in the comments. Only those who get this far will get it. Now let's continue with the story. Walter walked up to Emily and placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes full of understanding. "Emily, you represent exactly why I'm here today. Never let anyone define your worth. Use this opportunity to grow and prove to yourself that you are capable of extraordinary things." The showroom, once filled with sarcastic laughter and judgmental looks, was now overtaken by a respectful and reverent silence. The employees were not just witnessing a change in management, they were experiencing a shift in perspective, something that would shape their lives forever. And so, Walter Thompson did more than just transform a luxury dealership. he changed the way each of those employees saw themselves, giving them the chance to rewrite their stories, to let go of old prejudices, and to start a new journey where respect and dignity were the driving forces. After signing the contract and announcing the new direction Starlight Motors would take, Walter Thompson realized that there was still more to be done to solidify the lesson of humility and respect he wanted to leave behind. He knew that words were powerful, but concrete actions spoke even louder. Determined to make this moment unforgettable for everyone present, Walter prepared one last surprise. He turned to the gathered team and said in a firm and decisive tone, "Now that everyone understands the importance of treating people with respect, no matter who they are, I want to show you a practical example of what it truly means to see beyond appearances." With a simple gesture, Walter signaled toward the dealership's door, where a man entered, dressed in modest clothes and wearing a humble expression. The employees were puzzled, not understanding what this man was doing there. Robert and Mark exchanged uncertain glances, unsure if they should intervene or simply watch. "I want you all to meet Samuel," Walter said, pointing to the man who had just walked in. Samuel is a longtime friend, someone who has faced many challenges in life. He works in construction and has always dedicated himself to providing a better life for his family. Today, he's here, not as just any customer, but as a living proof that appearances can be deceiving. The employees looked at Samuel, surprised by the introduction, unsure of what to expect. Samuel, visibly nervous, stepped forward and pulled something out of his pocket, a set of shiny keys. He held them up, and Walter continued with a proud smile. "These keys," Walter explained, "belong to the house Samuel just paid off with his hard-earned money. And not only that, but he also managed to save enough to buy the car of his dreams." Walter turned to the employees and added, "Samuel is exactly the kind of person you would have ignored, the kind you would have treated with indifference if he had come in here alone." The revelation left everyone in shock, and a heavy silence fell over the room. Robert, who had led the humiliation of Walter earlier, felt his face flush with shame as he realized the depth of his mistake. Mark stared at the floor, clearly remorseful and troubled by his own behavior. Walter continued, "Samuel, please choose the car you want. And this time, I want everyone here to do what they should have done from the start. Treat him with the respect and attention he deserves." The employees, without wasting a moment, rushed to assist Samuel, but this time with a completely different attitude. They were attentive, helpful, and genuinely interested in serving him. They now understood that Samuel, despite his modest appearance, was a person worthy of all the respect they could offer. As Samuel examined the cars, a young salesperson named Tom, who had always been quiet and often overlooked by his superiors, gathered the courage to speak. "Mr. Thompson," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I've always believed that people's value shouldn't be measured by what they wear or what they own, but I never had the chance to express that here. Thank you for showing us that it's possible." Walter smiled at Tom, feeling a surge of satisfaction. "Tom," he said, "your attitude is what will guide the future of this dealership. People like you are the key to turning this place into more than just a car showroom. Never lose that essence of treating everyone with humanity." As Tom smiled shyly, Samuel made his final choice, a sleek model he never imagined he could own in his lifetime. The employees, this time, not only celebrated Samuel's choice, but made him feel like the most important customer of the day. Walter turned to the team and concluded with a final message. "Remember, everyone who walks through these doors deserves respect. You never know the battles they're facing or the dreams they carry in their hearts. And that's what truly makes us rich, the ability to see the value in every human being beyond appearances." The showroom of Starlight Motors erupted in applause, but this time it wasn't just to celebrate the sale of a car. It was to celebrate a new era of respect, empathy, and humanity that Walter Thompson had instilled in each of them. As Walter Thompson watched the impact of his actions on Starlight Motors, he knew his mission was far from over. He wanted to leave one last lesson that was more than words or symbolic gestures, something that truly showed the depth of his intentions. With a slight smile on his face, Walter turned to Doyle, his lawyer, and gave a discreet nod. Doyle nodded back, fully understanding what needed to be done. The lawyer approached the employees, handing each of them a sealed envelope. Curiosity and tension grew among those present, and no one knew what to expect. "These envelopes contain something that will change each of your lives," Walter announced, his voice calm yet mysterious. "But I want you to open them only after I leave this dealership. Until then, I want you to reflect on everything that happened here today." With that enigmatic statement, Walter turned his back and started to walk toward the exit. The employees stood motionless, holding the envelopes with trembling hands, as a wave of murmurs and speculation spread through the room. Robert and Mark exchanged nervous glances, trying to guess what was about to happen. As soon as Walter stepped out the door, the employees could no longer contain their anxiety. They quickly opened the envelopes, and what they found inside left them speechless. Each one held a check for a significant amount of money, but what truly moved them was the handwritten message from Walter. "This check is an invitation to start over. Use it to do something you've always dreamed of, but never had the courage to pursue. Let this gesture be a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that everyone deserves a second chance in life." Tears welled up in the eyes of the employees as they realized the true generosity and intention of Walter. He wasn't just transforming the dealership. He was giving each of them the opportunity to change their own lives, to follow their dreams, and to break free from the prejudice that had held them back for so long. Robert, upon reading the message, felt a lump form in his throat. He remembered all the opportunities he had let pass by in his life, out of fear of taking risks and his habit of judging others superficially. With the check in his hands, he realized that he finally had the chance to be a different person, to start fresh and do something that truly mattered. Mark, on the other hand, looked at the check as if it were a ticket to a new destination. He had always wanted to start his own business, but never believed he could. Now, with Walter's unexpected help, he saw a new possibility opening up before him. It was as if the veil of arrogance and cynicism he had worn for so long was lifting, revealing a person he barely recognized. As the employees absorbed the impact of this unexpected turn of events, Walter, now outside Starlight Motors, looked toward the horizon with a sense of satisfaction and serenity. He knew he had planted seeds of change that would not only transform that dealership, but also the lives of everyone who worked there.